Hi, Lee, and hi, everyone. This is Namali. I'm joining from Boulder, Colorado, and Lee, you're joining from?
Amsterdam in the Netherlands.
So, Lee and I are creating a little bit of work around what we refer to as practical integral. And practical integral is about taking some of our favorite developmental theories, such as integral theory, for example, which is Ken Wilber's work primarily, and we are trying to really promote practice. We want to use the theory and make it more accessible and fun and easy while not losing the depth and the complexity. So, really trying to see how we can make some of these theoretical concepts much more embodied and practical, and really discover and honor the roots of these theories and bring them to our day to day lives.
Absolutely. I think one of the things you and I both agree on is that we sort of strive to help ourselves and also help other people to use the insights that integral theory as a sort of a meta theory that can contain all sorts of other theories on reality, that we can use that context to improve the quality of our daily lives by taking all sorts of practical actions to improve our health and our well-being and to live a happier and more meaningful life. One of the ways that I personally think about integral theory is as a framework that we can use to sort of perceive the world as accurately as possible and as inclusively as possible, including basically all of the aspects of reality, so that we can see what we tend to leave out as an individual, so that we can very consciously include that and be as whole as we can and consciously embody the highest aspects of ourselves and the deepest aspects of ourselves. To lead us into the integral model, we'll now turn to Jeff, who will start us off with the quadrants.
Yeah, so I'm Jeff Salzman, and I'm happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me. And I have been involved in integral, well, I suppose I could say that since the mid-'80s, when I saw a book on a bookshelf at a bookstore called Up from Eden. And I felt my life change in that moment, where it was a reversal of everything I had been taught as a good little Christian boy about the fall from paradise. And the fall from paradise is sort of knitted into the psyche of humanity in general. And many myths about that abound. But this is up from Eden. So the idea is that we are evolving to a paradise. And so that changed everything for me. And that was the beginning of my love affair with integral theory. And at that time, I had been a seeker. I had moved to Boulder, Colorado from Western Pennsylvania, and I was indulging in all of the green est and primal screams and all of the good stuff that was happening here in Boulder. And there was a big Buddhist community, and I was seeing all these teachers coming through, and everybody had a guru, but I didn't, and because nobody quite did it for me. You know, I got something from everybody, but I thought, well, this is my fate, until I met Ken through his book. And Ken became my teacher. He had no idea. I was just one of his readers. But that's the kind of impact integral theory can make on people if they're ready for it in a way. And it just allows us to plug into what I call the updraft of emergence that is knitted into the cosmos and to each one of us, and to realize ourselves as evolving beings in evolving relationships with other beings, in evolving cultures, and in an evolving cosmos. And that was new for me. And to actually feel that in my cells and bones was, the kickoff. And that has never really changed. It's just been more and more fruitful as a way of understanding the world and myself and harmonizing all of the wars that go on, And so where I am now is I am producing a podcast called The Daily Evolver. I've been doing that for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. I think the subhead is Integral Insight into Politics and Culture. So that's what I do is I guess I teach integral, and I also look at current events. That's sort of a mutually reinforcing thing. You look at current events through an integral lens. It also teaches you about integral theory. And it also I just think helps us to be heartened in these times. You know, these times, which actually, if you talk about up from Eden, these times would be paradise to any of our ancestors. This is what they were writing about, where you get all the milk and honey you wanted. And the lion lies down with the lamb in the meat section of the supermarket. You know, it's just an amazing thing that here we are. It happened. There's new sets of problems and new sets of crises, and it's an evolving calamity in a way, this evolution of human history, just as our own individual evolutions are. If we think of how we grew from children, you know, the school of hard knocks is not optional for most people. And so, you know, I often think of evolution in this process of emergence as being beautiful because it created, you know, from a bunch of hydrogen, here we are. All you do is just let it sit there for 13.8 billion years and you get us. So something's happening here. And so I lost my train of thought.
Well, thanks, Jeff, for the introduction. And just to speak from my own personal experience, is that listening to you sort of bring the integral lens to current affairs, but also sometimes to historical affairs, it creates a sort of space where all of the sort of conflicting perspectives can exist at once with a minimum of tension. That's my experience. It's sort of soothing.
Yeah, I agree. And it allows you to be more, like I said, heartened, friendly. You move from this sort of liturgy that so many of us have. It's just part of the consciousness of humanity right now, where this shouldn't be happening. It's awful that it is. I can't stand it. Somebody needs to be condemned, you know? And that's just, I notice it myself. I'm doing it all day long. You know, it could be about the thermostat. You know, why do these idiots turn it up so high? Whatever. I mean, it's just all the time. And you sort of make a fundamental shift to, this should be happening is tough sometimes, but this is happening. This is the nature of a growing system. It's chaotic. There's suffering built in. I don't understand exactly why there's so much suffering built in, and I would complain to God if I ever meet him about that part. But that seems to be the nature of it, you know. And so we are driven forward by, on one hand, fighting with each other. And that's it's been very fruitful, even though it's so brutal. And we move forward often by fighting. And then we also move forward by loving each other. And, you know, we just can't keep our hands off each other. And that's so great. And there's just this magnetic pull we have. And so together, and this is one of the things about integral theory. I know we wanted to talk about the quadrants, but to just put that out here right now, that one of the biggest immediate benefits to me as a Ken Wilber book reader all by myself in Boulder, and nobody else wanted to know anything about it. You know, it was like I gave books to people that was ridiculous. But I felt one of the first big benefits was this idea that reality arises in two dimensions, interiority and exteriority. So there's the world of stuff in my body and, you know, the world at large, the manifest creation. But then there's also this interior world. And have those both coexist and interpenetrate, but one can't colonize the other and one can't be reduced to the other. That was really helpful to me because I, like most people of our time, was, you know, I had thrown religion out with the bathwater. You know, I I had become a materialist, essentially, as most people are, most modern people. And so to feel that there's and actually, get that there's an interior reality, a non-material reality that's intelligent and has intention, and creativity is built into that. And there's a moment-by-moment opportunity to add creativity. These are some of Ken's teachings. And let me just pause for a moment just to say that thank you, Ken, for the work you have done and your life's work in bringing this together. There's a lineage of integral thinking that goes back at least to Hegel, and it's quite interesting. But Ken is the most significant and prolific of the modern integral philosophers. And so he has been a great capital T teacher to many, many of us.
So thanks, Jeff, for sharing sort of the influence that integral theory has had on you, and that the ways in which we can use it to improve basically the quality of our lives. And perhaps could you sort of go into a very brief discussion of the 5 elements of integral?
Yeah. What Ken Wilber has created is what is called the AQAL model, AQAL. And what that stands for is all quadrants, all levels, all lines, all states, and all types. And so these are 5 ways of understanding the cosmos. And the idea behind integral theory is to include everything. So we have this whole smorgasbord of human history that's available to us. And that's really a pretty new phenomenon. In the last, 50, 100 years, we could start reading histories of other people and teachings from other places. And here it all is. And we can see that it's been at war with each other. But let's bring it all together and create a theory of everything, if you will, where everything's included, and we see we just see the patterns that where nothing's left out. And so all quadrants means that reality arises in 4 quadrants that are delineated by 2 axes. One is the axis between being an individual and being in a collective. So that's one. And the other is the axis between one's interior and exterior. So we can get into the details of that, but the theory is, and it's a theory, there'll be better theories, Ken acknowledges that, but this is the best one so far, and I agree, because it includes everything. And so with quadrants, we see that, so I as Jeff, this is a map of me. There's my interior world, all my hopes and dreams and whatever, fantasies, all my thinking. Then there's my exterior world, my behaviors, my body, also my energy body. So those are 2 different things, and you can't collapse one into the other. And then there's individual and collective. So there's me, Jeff, and I have my interior and my exterior. And then there's all of us. And we see that that has an interior and an exterior. The interior of the collective is the culture. And we have cultures of friendships, we have cultures of families, we have cultures of communities, of nations, and human culture. And these are shared agreements and understandings. And just that, I always like to think of it, there's a term that Namali from Terry Patton uses it, called loosh. And it's that liquid space that we are all swimming in together, in the ways that we influence each other and the receptors we have for each other, that form sort of a liquid matrix that is delicious and again, not reducible to other quadrants. So that's the theory, is that this is a dimension of reality, and just knowing that is helpful, So then there's that's the interior of the collective. The exterior of the collective is the manifest world. So it's everything that, it's the earth, it's the cosmos, it's technology, it's the highways, it's the weather, and that's there. And that's not a figment of my imagination, And you can see how part of the wars of history are about people collapsing one quadrant or one side of this quadrants into the other. And so we have, I mentioned sort of the effects of it, but scientism, the idea that nothing exists that can't be touched or measured, basically collapses the world into the right-hand quadrants. So I am my body and the world exists, but my hopes and dreams are actually just sort of an artifact or a throw-off of synaptic activity. And, you know, it's evolved because cultures make us more safe, but it's all just material that's happening. So I don't know about you, but I believed that for a long time. And having the interiors reopened and re-legitimized so that I could feel the magic and the sloosh between me and other people, that I could take my own consciousness seriously and feel that I have a destiny and that there's appropriate urge that I'm expressing. I can't imagine not having that. And so I feel for people who are in scientism still, and there are a lot of them. And I try as a practice to think in that way occasionally, because it's always one of the great integral practices is just looking at different things from different angles, you know. So I try to look at it that way, and I can feel something shut down when that happens. So then you also have actually the people who collapse everything into the left-hand quadrant and say that this is all just a dream. You know, Namala, you and I went to Naropa, so we studied the Chittamatra, which is the mind-only school of Buddhism that says that the reality doesn't even exist. And from an integral perspective, we want to see that there's actually truth to both of those. I mean, the exclusivity claim isn't true. The thing that says this is the only thing isn't true. But that there is material reality is something that we want to fully get. And it's not just us, it's there, it's it. It's ontologically, it's there whether or not we believe in it. And then the other, that there is an interior reality that in a sense we create reality by being the receptors of whatever it is we're receiving. And together I and it create this world I live in. This is also true. But how much richer is that than either of those? You know, so this is the beauty of integral, is that the minute I want to throw something out of my worldview, or there's people who annoy me or think you're not getting in, I can't do that anymore. First of all, it's boring. Secondly, as an integral practitioner, I just wanted to see how do they fit? You know, how can I see the piece of the truth they have? How can I be influenced by them instead of the other way around all the time? So anyway, that's the quadrants. I'm sorry, I got off on a roll.
No, that's okay. I think just kind of thinking about the quadrants, another very easy way, if someone doesn't know what the quadrants are or what integral theory is, the quadrants is one of the first things that they will encounter through Ken Wilber's teachings. It's kind of funny how now, after many years of being a student of integral theory and working within that realm, how actually sometimes it just disappears into the background and I don't even think about it. But I think some of us forget how incredibly valuable it is to, when we first had that insight, that wow, you know, and also, I don't know where I read this or heard it, but Ken has, I think, mentioned how Ken Wilber himself, that he was locked up in a house for several years in his house, and he was really living like a hermit. He had lost his wife to cancer, and that story is in a beautiful book called Grace and Grit. And after that, I think he locked himself inside his house up in the hills of Boulder here, North Boulder. And I think I remember a story where he had written down on paper every discipline he could ever imagine, or every way of being, every perspective that he could think of. And he started categorizing them and trying to make sense of what each discipline was bringing to us, is trying to teach us, trying to communicate to us. And eventually he saw all of these, hundreds, if not thousands of disciplines and ways of being that he could think of, activities, schools of thought. They all fell into these 4 areas.
Yeah.
These 4 main perspectives that individuals and collectively we can take.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so some of them ended up being what I often call, or many of us see as, intangible. You can't point a finger at it or touch it and say, this is how it exists in this much quantity. But it is there. You can't see air, but it certainly is there.
Yeah.
It is something to honor, in the same way that love or compassion, you can't ever measure these things. They're intangible, but they're deeply felt and valid.
Yeah.
And to realize that through the interior quadrants of the I and the we was just a beautiful insight somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. What we learn about ourselves, like self-awareness from a practice like meditation, you can't ever measure that, really. Not from using the methodologies of the exteriors, which is the world of the tangible. You can put a finger on it. I can touch this table or touch my shoulders and say, these things actually exist. There's no argument about it. So when you first realize that these 4 key areas are really fundamental, and that everything we do or think about can belong in them. And one of the most beautiful teachings also about the quadrants is that they correlate and they impact each other. So depending on the way the lower right technology is changing, my upper left interiority can be influenced by that and can change that. Similarly, a visionary thinker, because of his or her or their really disruptive thinking in their upper left and their intentionality, they can really intuit and impact technology, or how a community might come together and what meaning they make out of it.
Yeah.
So they're always this fluid movement between the 4 quadrants, and how they impact is really beautiful. And it's easy to forget that we are a part of this, that there's actually nothing outside of the quadrants, in a way.
Right.
Sometimes I ask, certain times that I've taught this or I've studied this even, can I think of even like one thing, like try to come up with one thing that doesn't belong in the quadrants?
Yeah.
And I actually can't. I have never quite managed to do that. And that's the whole point of having the quadrants teachings, really. Yeah. You talked about our experience at Naropa and the Chitta Mantra School and all that. I think the way that I see what doesn't necessarily belong, or how I talk about it, is in the Buddhist context, we talk about ultimate reality and relative reality. So when we speak about the quadrants, I do want to say, though, that quadrants are pointing at relative reality. It's the expression of how relative reality is expressed through the world and through us and as communities. It arises out of the larger context of ultimate reality, which is sort of like the paper on which the 4 quadrants are drawn. So just to kind of give that as far as, what's in the quadrants and what's not, or what is outside of it to some degree.
Yeah. Right on.
Excellent.
Lee, were you going to add anything?
Well, no, that's actually, while Namali was speaking and saying there's nothing that's not in the quadrants, I immediately thought emptiness. But indeed, your description is precisely how I would also describe it. So for people who are sort of coming to this anew, I think it's good to realize that the integral theory is a sort of a model that can help make sense of the world in a very comprehensive way, and that it's also fun to play around with and to sort of experiment with and to explore.
Yeah. Well, shall I move on?
Please.
To the other,
Sure, yeah.
the other. Before I do, just the one example I would that always comes to mind when I'm explaining the quadrants to people is how Ken organized the whole field of psychotherapy or psychology, basically. So we have the upper left is Freudian psychoanalysis, even Jungian, that sort of thing, where we're looking at our interiors. The upper right is medicine, how we take medicine, you know, Prozac and whatever to change our states. Lower left would be Gestalt, where we're working at family dynamics and that sort of thing. And the lower right would be behavioralism, how we're interacting with the system at large, just more mechanically in a way, even though it's talking the mind. And so all of a sudden, all of these warring schools of psychotherapy are integrated. And the only thing we have to get rid of is each of their claims that they're the only one, the only good one. And let the teachings of all four of them just arise into a bigger open space. And that's the sort of quality of integral consciousness that we're talking about, is you begin to take so many perspectives, just as a practice, this is an integral practice, that eventually the self becomes, you identify with the space within which perspectives are arising more than any one particular one. And that's a whole new ball game there, you know. So anyway, so that's the quadrants.